Hey guys, welcome back to the Fitness Experiment Podcast. This week we got to circle all the way back to stuff that we just keep having to deal with, which is the social medias and all the shenanigans that occur via that little method of communication that we all have have access to at any given moment. We've done episodes about J-Lo's nonsense. We've done episodes about what's Julian Michaels' Biggest Loser.
Oh yeah, that's the one I was trying to think of earlier.
So social media came through again with a Mythbusters episode. A little inspiration for us and some easy content.
Keeps things fresh.
That's right.
What was the difference between the J-Lo Jillian Michaels thing?
I have no idea. I know at the time we were really fired up about it, but
yeah, that was one of our hottest episodes. So if you guys haven't listened to it and you watch J-Lo at the Super Bowl, it'd be a good one for you to listen to.
Yeah.
Not that that has anything to do with it, but
no.
People like current topics, and I guess she's more current because she was just shaking her booty on TV.
She was.
In front of millions.
Just killing it.
Yeah, it was good.
The latest shenanigans come from an account called Morning Chalk Up, which is an account that I've been following for a really, really long time. To be honest, I really don't look at their posts that much because a lot of their stuff isn't super intriguing to me. The only things that I really click through on is the event stuff. Sometimes they post like leaderboards or other goings-ons in the CrossFit community, which I'm down to check out. But this past week, they came through with a banger of a post that got everybody's fired up. And I think like Instagram works on a different algorithm now for your feed. And I think I saw it for like 3 days in a row just because so many people that I follow and like interact with were commenting, liking, commenting again and kind of going back to it.
It's ridiculous how that happens.
Yeah, so I saw it a lot over a 3-day span. And just as like a total audience thing, this account has 122,000 followers. So there's a lot of people that saw this post. And then there was 856 comments on the post.
I'm curious if their followers shot up at all after the post.
I'm really not sure. Just looking at their other stuff right now on their page though, like their average comments is like 20. Okay, so they went from their average being 20 comments to having 856 comments, and they actually shut down the comments after a while. They shut them off on this post. This is something that I know like you have a lot of expertise in, and it's also just a very misunderstood topic in general, which is the ketogenic diet. A lot of people I just don't think actually know what it is at all, which is like the kind of the basis of the problem. And then it just goes so many different directions. Keto's kind of turning into like vegetarianism, where there's so many different like kinds and names for it now.
Yeah, that's
and then
very true.
Same thing with like paleo. When paleo was hot, there was like this kind of like offshoot. It's kind of like religions, right? It's like they like create. It's like, I want to be keto, but I don't want to do X, Y, Z. So I'm going to shoot off here and I'm going to create my own little church of keto over here.
Yeah,
and then we're going to follow these rules and everybody else is wrong and all this nonsense. It's weird how attached people get to it.
Yeah, that's a perfect comparison, I think.
It's creepy, man.
Perfect.
Like nutrition is like the weirdest sort of like subculture. Just stems into like a little cult.
It's like at the very, very top, we all eat food. Versus religion at the very, very top, we all believe in. Can you even say they all believe in God? I don't know. I don't know enough about
some sort of higher power anyway.
Something of a higher power, and then it's like, yeah, like you said, but then you got to follow specific rules to fit into your individual lane. That's accurate. And people get really, really pissed off if you oppose their
so mad
dogma.
Oh yeah. Just reading these comments. A lot of the stuff that's at the top of the comment list are like famous CrossFit athletes because they got the most interaction on their posts, right? Like Pat
Vellner on there,
yeah. He hops in. All he says is this is an irresponsible post, which I haven't even read to you guys yet. If you haven't seen it yet, it's still secret, I guess. But 1,200 likes on that one comment. Then you get Jacob Hepner, you get Meredith Root chiming in. You get Joe Scally, you got Wad Science on here, you got Lane Norton commenting, you got Dex Hopkins, you got Christina Andali, you got...
Where's mine?
Integrated Performance and Brain Ignition. There he is. And
what did Joe Scally say?
Something just ridiculous. He said, I love pizza too much and want to hear your thoughts on this. And he tagged his wife, who's a really awesome nutrition coach.
That's what I was wondering, but...
Yeah.
Sweet.
So the post was...
Yeah, I guess we should tell you guys first and foremost if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So at the very, very top, kind of like the highlighted bold part is if you are serious about CrossFit, you should try Keto. And then they kind of have like an extended quote below that, which is from the article that this fella wrote online. And it says, the ketogenic diet is the only diet in existence that fundamentally transforms the way your metabolism operates. All other diets rely mostly on glucose as a fuel source, whereas keto actually relies on fat to energize you, both from the fat you eat and your body fat. Guy's name is Nikolai Archuleta. We don't know who that is, but anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things even just in those snippets, but also in the full-length article that they posted online. And if you guys haven't seen it, we will attach the full article and the post into the show notes, and you can check that out. So, where do we even begin with this? Maybe...
I think even beyond the post, I think that just there's a general confusion. And I know for you, since you're an expert in this area, it's not very confusing for you. But I think for myself, and then I think for like the general listener, the question is, okay, what are we talking about now when we talk about the ketogenic diet? Because it seems like everyone has a different perspective on what this is. But the thing is, like, it's only one thing.
Yeah.
But it can't be multiple things at the same time. Anything just can only be one thing. So what is the one thing that the ketogenic diet actually is?
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. So ketogenic diet by definition is macronutrients of about, there is exact numbers, but I'm not like 100% certain right now what they are, so I'm just going to give you a range. But keep in mind there is exact numbers. So your fat intake is between 70 to 75%, 75% at least. Protein coming from about 10 to 15%, and then carbohydrates is usually about 5%. So I don't even know if those add up to 100, but again, those are kind of like the ballparks. The carbohydrates usually are under 30 grams total per day. And then I think the other like most important thing here is that a ketogenic diet is different than a low carbohydrate diet or different than a very low carbohydrate diet. So that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. But I just want to kind of back up quickly before I get into that a bit farther. One of the important things about a ketogenic diet, like what makes it a ketogenic diet, is actually having the protein quite low. So like 10 to 15% of your total calories from protein, like that's really, really low. Usually, like to give you an example, that would usually be, it'd be something like if you're a 200-pound individual, you're probably consuming under like 100 grams of protein, which is pretty low, right?
Yeah, considering usually it's like about 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Yeah, it's kind of like the general recommendation.
So half of what would normally be
ingested. So why is that? Like, I think if people know where it came from, it's easier to understand the ketogenic diet. So it was first created, I guess, if you will, in order to treat epilepsy was the big thing. So I think this was in like the 1920s. They've realized that clinicians realized that when the patients with epilepsy fasted, so they didn't have food for an extended period of time, their seizures basically went away. So these were in patients who they tried every kind of drug in the book and nothing worked. And then all of a sudden they realize, well, shit, their seizures go away when they stop eating. Why is that? Well, it's because when we fast, our body starts to produce what are called ketones. And these are essentially produced in order to fuel the brain. So if we're not consuming food for an extended period of time, like if you're stranded on an island or something like that, the body has these amazing survival mechanisms in place that can, in the absence of incoming energy, still make energy for your brain so that you can ultimately survive. I mean, that's why we're around today, is because of this. So they were fasting, they would produce these ketones, the ketones would go to the brain, and then they found that they resolved seizures. So then what the ketogenic diet was made for is to replicate this physiological state of fasting. Because you can't just fast someone, 24/7, 365 days a year, like you're dead. So they made this to replicate that state of fasting, or they made this to replicate what's known as ketosis, which is this state you're in when your body is producing ketones. And like still to this day, the ketogenic diet is pretty effective for treating epilepsy, and it's because it increases these circulating ketones. So that's where it came from. That's by definition still what the ketogenic diet is, but now it's being confused time and time again with a low carbohydrate diet or a very low carbohydrate diet, which those don't really have a definition, right? I mean, right. that could mean anything. I mean, low carb for you is going to be different than Jesse, than for me, than for my grandma or whatever.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think almost 100% of the people that if they are interacting with me and they're like, yeah, I follow the ketogenic diet, which I don't know, it's like CrossFitters, right? They always got to talk about it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying like people get very passionate about it. They want to share what they're doing with other people, which I think is amazing because that's how the conversations start. And without the conversations, especially long form conversations, there's no advancement in anything. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not chirping anybody, but I'm saying like it's about a 99% chance that if somebody is keto or thinks that they're keto, it's going to come up in conversation if you talk to them long enough. But most of the people, it's like when you start digging and asking more questions, like, well, you're not following a ketogenic diet at all. You're just eating lower carb than you did before, which is not the same thing at all. And you're saying that it's a ketogenic diet is just, you've just been misled. And again, it's nobody's fault. It's just, we got to dig a little bit deeper into this stuff to help everyone understand exactly what it is that they're doing so that they have all the knowledge that they need to make long-term decisions for themselves from a health perspective. Okay, so that's what the ketogenic diet is.
I forgot one thing. I think I'm sure we'll get into this more as we go along here, but the reason that the protein is low on a ketogenic diet is that too much protein will prevent you from getting into ketosis. So that part is important.
Okay.
And then one more thing I should say, just because this is another, like people kind of fail to recognize the individuality. So I said that, again, like traditional ketogenic diets are usually under 30 grams of carbohydrates per day. But again, that's going to vary. So like to give you an example, someone who's very sedentary, like doesn't work out, does not exercise whatsoever, they would have to have that lower number of say like 30 grams of carbs per day in order to get into ketosis. Whereas you or I, or someone who's very, very active, burning through a ton of energy, they could have upwards of, probably like 100 grams of carbs per day. And that could technically still be considered a ketogenic diet for them because they're burning through that and then they're still getting into ketosis.
Right. You did an experiment with yourself because that's what you do. And you were up to 200 grams of carbs a day while still producing ketones?
Yeah, that was a fun little one. And if you guys haven't listened to it yet, we talked about this in some pretty good detail a few episodes back. So maybe we'll link to that again, and I will try not to ramble on about it too much right now. But yeah, basically what I was doing was I was trying to figure out essentially how many carbohydrates I could consume per day while still being in ketosis at different times. And yeah, so I found out that it was roughly like, I forget the number and it varied a little bit, but it was roughly like 200 to 300 grams I could have the day prior. And then the next day, if I worked out kind of semi-fasted and then didn't eat after that workout, I would then start to again kind of slip into ketosis. So yeah, it's a cool little, I don't know, it was fun.
Yeah. So there's a couple people like yourself, and then there's one other guy on that I kind of keep tabs on their posts and things like that. Dr. Mike Hart.
Oh yeah.
He's big on the ketogenic diet as well.
Yeah.
The two things that you guys do that I don't see other people doing that say that they're following ketogenic diet is you're actually tracking and measuring the I'm a complete
ketones.
ignorant.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And you're actually doing blood samples. So is that something that if somebody's following a ketogenic diet, would you say that that's necessary, or are you guys going a step further, or like how would somebody even know if they're actually following a ketogenic diet?
It depends what their goals are with the ketogenic diet. Like if your goal is just to lose body fat, you don't need to know what your ketones are. It doesn't really matter. But if your goal is to say treat epilepsy, or even maybe treat concussion, which is, it looks like the ketogenic diet has a lot of potential to be beneficial for something like that. And there's lots of other illnesses too that there's a lot of research showing that a ketogenic diet is beneficial for them. But anyways, it depends on your goal. So if your goal is to treat like a specific illness, then you do need to know how high the ketones are, because with a lot of those, typically the higher your blood ketones, the more that are getting into the brain, and then the more you're getting those therapeutic benefits. And there's really no way of knowing unless you are measuring your blood. Like the urine strips are crap. They're really, really inaccurate. Like they're okay if you just kind of want to have some fun with it and see. But if you really want to know, then yeah, you got to keep track of your blood. Yeah, that's kind of that's the long and short of it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we've defined what this ketogenic diet actually is, circling back to the quote from the post, I just want to go over like the accuracy of the quote itself, like whether it is or isn't, because this is not something that I know a lot about, and it's something that you do. So I think you have a lot to share about it. So the quote again, just to circle back, it said the ketogenic diet is the only diet in existence that fundamentally transforms the way your metabolism operates. All other diets rely mostly on glucose as a fuel source, whereas keto actually relies on fat to energize you, both from the fat you eat and your body fat. Accurate, inaccurate?
Yeah, like most of that is essentially accurate. I don't really have a problem with any of that. And again, I think a lot of this stuff will probably pop up as we go through some of the studies that they referenced. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's totally one thing that makes it unique, is that it is, like, as it says, it's transforming your metabolic profile to switch from mostly burning sugar to burning mostly fats. So yeah, that's quite accurate. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't really have any issues with that. It's mostly like the bold at the top, right, which is what they're kind of.
So I want to go with this. Yeah. So we can check that box, like that information that they're putting out there, accurate, probably pulling from some sort of like abstract of a study, or like just a part of the article or something like that, which, as you know, really never tells the whole story. So the problem comes in with the whole bolded thing at the top, where it says, if you're serious about CrossFit, you should try keto.
Yeah, that's the problem, which is why we're talking about this in the first place, and probably why there was so many comments.
Oh yeah, there's lots. People were fired up.
So again, like, assuming he's actually talking about a ketogenic diet as we defined it, which he's saying keto, so we have to assume that it's right. I mean, yeah, it's a terrible idea. And not only because the carbohydrates are so low, but I think even more concerning than that, and I posted this the other day, like, to me, the bigger concern is actually the low protein on keto. I think you could make a low, quote unquote, low carbohydrate diet work with CrossFit. I'm not saying like it would be superior or anything like that, but with a low carbohydrate diet, at least your protein would be at that like roughly 1 gram per pound of body weight. That would be enough that'd be more than enough to support lean muscle gain. You're getting all the other benefits from the amino acids as well, like for the immune system, for your brain, oxidative stress, so on and so forth. And then you're also with some of that protein. So again, I'm still talking about at like roughly 1 gram per pound of body weight. Some of that protein is then going to be converted into glucose by your body. So even though you're consuming very little carbohydrates, you can kind of like almost in a way transform that protein into carbohydrate, and then your body doesn't really know the difference. Now, on the other hand, with keto, not only are your carbs super, super low, but your protein is just so damn low that, I mean, it's kind of like, in my opinion, like the perfect storm paired with CrossFit. And I guess like the other thing we should really note early on is that the reason this is such a dangerous combo is because, as many of you guys probably already know, CrossFit is mostly, you'll hear people say like it's highly glycolytic, right? So all people mean when they say that is that it's typically like very high intensities. So like high heart rate, high output. Another example would be something like hockey or rugby or maybe football to an extent if it's like a longer play. But at these high intensities, the body needs that source of sugar to meet that high demand. That's just how it works. So without that, that's where you can get into some problems. I don't even remember what the initial question was.
Yeah, what the boulder part's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So just suggesting that everyone should try keto. I mean, for me, this is a problem with a lot of stuff anyways. It's just a very general comment to make, right? It is irresponsible because there's no support afterwards. It's just like, hey guys,
yeah,
hey 122,000 people that follow this account. Here's some just blind advice for you. Good luck, right? And that in itself isn't responsible.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can see why they would post something like this because it's a popular topic and it gets a lot of people talking about it. So like the carbs and fat combo being low,
carbs and protein
being low is a perfect storm for what?
I mean, like first and foremost, a decrease in performance, but honestly, that's probably like the least of people's concerns with something like this.
Right.
Because, you guys that have been listening to us for a while, this is all going to be kind of maybe a little redundant to you, but you know that like when you work out, especially at these high intensities, your stress levels are going up and your inflammation levels are going up. And that's totally cool. That's all normal and fine because the body adapts to that. But if you are not consuming adequate protein and carbohydrates, those are going to stay high all the time. And then you're just going to kind of lead to all of these problems. I mean, you're going to have hormonal issues. You're going to have high levels of inflammation. In kind of like practical perspective, you're going to be like wired but tired. So you'll feel exhausted, but you'll then go to bed at night and not be able to sleep, or you'll wake up in the middle of the night. You might get like some joint pain or brain fog or whatever. Like it's a long list, but the point is, or you might hear it as like quote unquote adrenal fatigue. Like that would be kind of the most likely or common side effect to all of this. So point with that is like the performance impairment, like sure, whatever. If that was the only side effect, that's not really an issue, but all these other things that can lead to some actual long-term damage is that, I mean, that's the real concern.
Right.
And you could throw like, we're kind of lumping everything together because it's really all very, very similar. Like we're throwing in like overtraining, that adrenal fatigue, that burnout. It's all kind of in that same category, and that's the danger with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the next part to that is we're also giving this advice to a demographic that probably also follow a training methodology that isn't ideal for what they're trying to do anyways. So what I mean by that, like a lot of times the CrossFit community likes to do more, and typically more from the, I would say, beginner to intermediate level, where it's still kind of glamorized a little bit. That demographic does CrossFit more for fun, so they don't really look too much into the future as to like, how is this going to affect my performance, my health, my wellness long term. It's more about, I want to hit this really fun, hard workout with my buddies and, throw down and, see who can go the fastest or do the most reps or whatever. But we know for most people who want to just be generally healthy and fit, that high intensity, kill yourself every day model is faulty in itself. And then combining that with a nutrition routine that isn't even supporting their basic human function, let alone the added intensity and stress onto their already probably stressful life, is just even worse.
Yeah,
like it's just it's a real bad combo of things.
Yeah, that's a good point, because people forget about that part too, is that the stress in your daily life and the stress in the gym is kind of the same thing. Like a lot of the times your body doesn't really know the difference.
Right. And we know that like peak performance and sickness on the whole health continuum are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like sickness is on one end, performance is on the other end, but they're at the same level, right? Because there's so many risks that if performance is your only goal and it's winning and it's points and it's those things, like your health is part of it, but it's not the number one priority. Your number one priority, if you're at that level, is to win, because that's how you make a living. That's how you make money. That's how you maintain your sponsorships. Like I'm talking about that level. The weird thing is a lot of people try to combine like this. I want to have, decrease body fat or whatever. And they combine that with what they think they need to do for a training perspective with like what the top end people are doing, not understanding that they fall in the middle, where their actual goal is just to be healthy and fit. It's not to be first place at the CrossFit Games, because we're not even close.
Yeah.
Only one person gets that in the entire world. But so many people chase that and forget about all the little intricate pieces that go into it.
Yeah, like the inverted U shape, right? Like everything's the inverted U. Like
absolutely,
it's good in a good in a healthy dose or serving, but too much or too little is bad.
Right.
Like water, you can die from too much, but dehydration is a bad thing.
That's right.
Broccoli, you could die from eating too much broccoli. You could die from too much exercise. Like that holds true with everything. Yeah. Cold and heat, like that's a perfect example too. Cold and heat in the appropriate doses is extremely beneficial for long-term health, but too much, too little, you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Did you pull references from the article?
Yeah. So the actual article they posted online, like the full one, it's pretty short, so it was actually really easy to go through. And all the studies he referenced, I was already familiar with, so it made things pretty easy. Mm-hmm. Like the one I even included in one of my newsletters the one time. This was kind of like several months back before I did my own little guinea pig experiment with this. So yeah, we can go through some of those because there's some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So the first one, well, let me just try and pull up his quote when he referenced this one. You have it pulled up there. Like, what was kind of like the statement he used when he referred to the first study? Do you know? Oh, sorry. I don't have the full article pulled up.
I can try and find it here for you.
I think it was something like there was no impairment to like 1 rep max back squat or something like that. So we were trying to find the full length article, and we were having some troubles because they have so many frickin' links and they're like free on Instagram. But all we did was take the quote from their post. If you're serious about CrossFit, try keto. Put it into Google. What's first on the list?
Yeah, they got it.
They got it figured out.
Okay, so he references his first study, which has a reference link that I think you have already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says that in this first study, Athletes following the keto diet actually lost much more body fat than the control group who followed a typical high carb diet. And there was no significant difference in the performance metrics of a 1 rep max back squat, 400 meter row run time, and VO2 max. In other words, the keto athletes achieved a better body composition and did not lose any ground in performance.
Right. Yeah, there was some big red flags. I'm not going to say there wasn't red flags in the study. There was red flags in their interpretation of the study. Because human research is like bloody hard to, not only is it hard to get like funding for in the first place so that you can even run the study, but it's even harder to have like a well-controlled, randomized controlled trial with humans. So just keep that in mind. Like, I'm not bashing the study, I'm bashing the way they interpreted the study. So the study was called The 3-Month Effects of a Ketogenic Diet on Body Composition, Blood Parameters, and Performance Metrics in CrossFit Trainees, a pilot study. So pilot study essentially just means they just kind of plopped one group and then they put them on a keto diet and they said, let's see what happens. So they didn't have like another group not on keto that they were comparing them to. So their main claim with this was the body fat percentage. Well, again, like massive red flag here is that the keto group was fatter at the start. So, I mean, that right there kind of summarizes it.
Yep. Increase the potential.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the other big thing to me. So not only was the keto group higher body fat percentage before they started, but during this study, the keto group completed an average of 27 workouts during the intervention, whereas the control group completed an average of 20 workouts. So that's a pretty big difference. Mm-hmm. Like when we're talking about under 30 workouts,
right?
One's close to 30, the other one's at 20. Like, again, how much energy are you burning? Well, this group is burning a ton of extra energy, so of course they're going to be lean, or they're going to lose more body fat. They did more.
Yeah. And
they had more to burn, which the beginner effect, like, it's going to make it easier to lose that.
Right. So that checks that box.
Yeah.
What about the like performance metrics? How are they, did it say how they were tracking those? Like,
yeah, so they did, what'd they do? They did a 1 rep max back squat, 1 rep max power clean, and then I think they just did like a 400 meter run. So this was a bit of an issue too, and this is another thing that is not really easy to pick out. Like, you kind of have to read into it a little bit. But so the quote said, if you're serious about CrossFit, right? So I think that's an important point. If you're serious about it, well, the average back squat for the participants, if we use like a ratio, the body mass ratio, so like how heavy their back squat was compared to body weight, I'll let you explain that because I just butchered it, but the average was about 1.37.
Right, which is not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Relative strength, like you're looking for your back squat to be at least 2 times your body weight before you could even call yourself like an intermediate CrossFitter.
Right, yeah, so that right there.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're not serious, that's the other thing. But again, like the beginner effect, like if their back squat is that low, the potential to increase that is high.
That was in the keto group or in both?
That was the overall average, I believe, of everyone in the study. So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, for me, there's just so many question marks with that. And like you said initially, that's just a problem with like human trials anyway.
Yeah.
But the main questions I would have is like, what would be the average training age of these individuals in each group? How is that training age determined? Like, did you ask them what they've been doing, or have you been tracking them for years to see what they've been doing? Have they been actually, because if you ask somebody what they do, it's like, oh yeah, I've been lifting weights since I was, say they're 32. It's like, yeah, I started lifting weights when I was 18.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. But they leave out the part that they didn't lift weights for 8 years. And when they were lifting weights when they were 18 to 22, they were lifting weights with their buddies at Gold's Gym. And it was majority like unilateral stuff, single joint, not very complex movements, i.e. bicep curls, pec flies, things like that. Like that doesn't that doesn't really contribute to an actual training age. That's not the same. And then what do their movements look like? What was the potential for like positional improvements? What are the standards for these things? There's too many unknowns to make it anywhere close to being an accurate,
totally.
Like, especially when you're talking performance. Like body fat percentage, okay, cool. It went down. You measured it, however you measured it. I'm not sure how they did in the study, whether it was like skin fold or
I forget what they did to measure it.
Yeah. So there's questions there in terms of like the accuracy of the actual body fat testing itself.
And even like the most basic control of all is having both groups consume the same number of calories. They didn't monitor that. So we can't even say like if the keto group just ate less.
Yeah. So that's tough. So, but again, like we're not disagreeing with the conclusion of the study. It's just like that's obviously a very big misinterpretation of the
big time,
of the results of the study, and a pretty irresponsible thing to pull from that particular study.
Yeah. And like who are some like bigger names with morning chalk up? Like, is that I just can't believe that none of them would have been like, well, hey, let's open up one of these studies and look through it to see if this is actually legit. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think since it's really just what's it called? Like a blog sort of thing, right? Like they're more just, it's kind of like, CNN or Fox, but for focusing on CrossFit, right? So I don't think that, like, there's some founders here listed on their website, and like I don't really want to attack them, obviously, but like the editors and the people that are writing these articles and the people that are putting these articles out, like it's clear that they like CrossFit, but I mean, when your kind of description on the website is like you're an editor and you're a wrangler of words, or a tech guru and you're a cat herder, like I don't know, it's like nothing against what they're trying to do. Like it's good. Media is important and like it gets information out there, but like the people that are putting the articles out, it's not like they're well versed in all the specifics of what they're putting out there. I think they're more putting it out there as like conversation starters, which starts conversations like we're having right now, which again I think is a good thing, but it's not like a group of scientists that are putting out articles that are written by them. They're editors that are putting together articles that are being sent to them and then putting out the ones that they would like to. Probably the ones that they think would get the most interaction, which is, they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, because it's sexy. It's definitely sexy stuff. Like, really, I can improve my performance with keto? I mean, shit, that's why I tried that experiment in the first place. Right. Not the keto, but the low carb.
That's right.
Because there's a lot of sexy possibilities.
Yeah. So that was the first study that they reference anyway.
Right.
There was a second one as well.
Yeah.
So this one says the results show that the keto diet caused athletes to burn a higher percentage of fat for fuel at higher exercise intensities. This is a big deal because it means that athletes were relying on their endless supplies of fat for energy, even at exercise intensities up to 80% of VO2 max.
Yeah. So like the study, I was very familiar with this study. Super interesting study, but the way they kind of translate it here doesn't really have any merit. Like basically what's going on is because their primary source of energy is now fat, well then, at higher intensities, they're going to be burning more fat. It's just because that's what they have. Like the body is adapting to what you're giving them. Mm-hmm. So there's some potential benefit to this, but only if you can maintain it as you jump back on like a higher carbohydrate diet. Mm-hmm. So like, how can I explain that? It's kind of confusing. So like I said earlier, like when you get to a certain intensity, like at those high intensities, something that's frequent in CrossFit or hockey or whatever, you can only burn glucose. And so this will happen at a different point for everyone, but kind of roughly like a cutoff, once you get to say like around like 70% of your VO2 max, that's when your body is going to switch from burning fat to sugar, because only sugar can meet that high intensity. So what they're saying is that because these people have switched onto a keto diet, they can now make that switch later on, which again, like this could have some benefit, but not while you're on a keto diet, because you don't have the sugar there. So like it doesn't really matter. I mean, the kind of the simple example here is that, say like, you know, your town is switching over from using like mostly vehicles for transportation, and they're switching over to using trains. So sweet, they switch over and start using trains, but they destroy all the roads for the vehicles. So what happens when you want to now switch back to using vehicles? Well, you're kind of screwed because you've totally switched over. Like it's the exact same thing here. By doing keto and only fueling your body with fats, it actually kind of, in a sense, forgets how to use glucose as efficiently. So it's not like you're able to like miraculously use both. It's that your body has just switched over because, well, that's all there is. So there's not necessarily the kind of the summary to this one is that sweet, they're using fat at higher intensities, but that doesn't mean they increase performance.
Right.
So
how would you even track if somebody's using fat during exercise? Like how would they even complete that study?
Yeah, hook them up to a bunch of shit. Okay. They use what's called an RER, or respiratory exchange ratio, and you can just hook someone up to that while they're riding like a stationary bike or whatever, and that will it'll literally just show you, like it'll track it on a computer screen right in front of you, like this is how much fat this individual is burning and this is how much glucose.
Is that accurate?
It's really cool. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, like that's why it is an interesting study. But it doesn't really hold any merit in terms of actually increasing performance.
Right. Like what is that? Why does that make the ketogenic diet something that everyone should try?
Yeah.
Right. Like where does that fit in? Kind of.
So I know what the argument is here, like, because I've made this argument before. Like if you can use fat for longer and at higher intensities, it decreases your need for constant sugar refueling. So reason that's beneficial is because your body's fuel tank for sugar is basically like, it's like this is just hypothetical, but it's like the size of a pop can, whereas your body's fuel tank for fat is like the size of your fridge. So if you have less of a need for sugar, you know, again, that could be beneficial, but it just has no merit here because you've also kind of untrained your body's ability to burn sugar. So, yeah, that's where that one kind of gets into the weeds a little bit, but right. Ultimately, I think it's a stretch for them to make that claim.
Yeah. Then they made a little jump from the whole conditioning side of things, like the high intensity thing, to strength training and muscle mass. And
that was the weightlifting study, right?
Yeah. It says professional Olympic lifters and powerlifters ate either a high carb diet or a keto diet. The keto athletes saw the same performance increases at a high carb diet as the high carb diet athletes, but the keto athletes actually saw a better body composition with a large loss of fat.
Yeah, they really kind of butchered and made that result really, really wordy. That study, so the keto group, they did lose more fat mass, but again, I don't believe they controlled for the calories in that one. And the group, that keto group that lost more fat, they also lost muscle. So I think that one, they lost like 6 kilograms weight, but 2 kilograms, I think it was muscle. which is like, that's a lot.
That's a lot. Oh yeah, especially when like
it's fucking a lot, really.
And those sports, like they have weight classes too, right? So like that can affect your future in the sport if your body weight's fluctuating
for sure.
like that. You're losing lean mass and fat is jumping all over the place. Like that's a real dangerous cycle to get on, especially hormonally for athletes.
Oh yeah,
males and females alike. Like it could be a recipe for like that could end your career, right? Especially if you're competitive. Like if you can't hit your weight classes anymore because your hormones are all fucked up, you're done.
Yep.
Like that's it for you. There's no coming back from that. And there's a lot of athletes right now that are going through the whole Olympic trials, and it's popping up on their accounts, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm done. Can't do it. My body, like I've developed these different, either developed or have had this autoimmune disease for a long time, and I didn't know why it was so hard for me to hit these weight categories." And if you're familiar with the sport, the weight categories have changed in the last year or so. They're very different now, with very big gaps in between them. It's like it's ending people's careers. Wow. So like that's how important this is, especially. And when you're talking about being serious about something, like that's as serious as it gets. When you're trying to make it to the Olympics, and then your whole career is over with because your body just can't do it anymore. It's like, yo, I'm done. Right? You start introducing a little bit more carbs, and then you balloon up like a jellyfish.
Yeah.
And then you take them out, and you lose muscle mass, you lose strength, you lose drive and performance. Like it's a pretty nasty little cycle to get yourself stuck in.
Yeah. So the other thing with this one, like again, I don't know if like the ones who lost weight were like trying to, or if it was a side effect or whatever. But anyways, they lost some muscle. I'm assuming that was not part of the plan. And then the other thing, this was kind of sneaky. Well, maybe it wasn't sneaky because the person writing the article maybe didn't see this, but so the study found that there was not a significant drop in 1 rep max in the keto group. But that's kind of tricky because significant drop, so I'm talking like statistics here, like if a study says there was a significant difference, you have to meet a specific statistical criteria in order to say that. But with weightlifting, that's misleading because a non-significant decrease in performance in weightlifting would be could still be important. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it might not be, the drop might not be enough to meet statistical significance, but that doesn't mean it wasn't like a meaningful drop.
Right.
Like I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass, but maybe they had like a 1 kilogram drop in 1 rep max and it didn't meet statistical significance. And so the study said there was no difference.
Right.
But shit, like that's pretty big, right? Oh, yeah. Like you said, weight's big. This is massive too. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the loophole to this one. I will say, like, one interesting thing with this study was that strength to mass ratio did increase in the keto group. So like even though they lost a lot of mass, they were still able to maintain a lot of their strength. But again, that's kind of just like one little side note. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really have anything to do with what the original article said.
What was the length of this one?
I'd have to check again. I don't have it in my notes. That's the other problem with a lot of these studies is that they vary in length. Like probably the last study we're going to talk about, where in the article they say keto athletes are even able to replenish glycogen faster or something like that. Like that was a 20-month study. Most keto studies are like 1 month. So that's the other problem.
Found it right here. Okay. A keto athlete can actually replenish their glycogen from fat and protein just as fast as an athlete who is eating a carb-based diet. Which is, we've talked about this at nauseum about the plant-based diet thing. Like, what is a carb-based diet? Maybe they define it in the actual study itself, but what is that? And then the article goes on to say this idea is revolutionary to many, but it's a key reason why keto works and works especially well for CrossFit. That is a massive statement.
Yeah.
That's like the okay, you're taking what you want to take out of these articles and you're kind of setting it up to make sense of what your argument is, which is what articles pretty much are. So like that's expected. But then just to come out with the whole, the haymaker at the end of that paragraph, that's a big statement to make. So what can people make of that?
It is totally like a revolutionary thing, but not for CrossFit.
Right.
But we kind of mentioned this earlier on, like, so this is the 20-month study, by the way. So like the people in this study have gone through a long ass adaptation period, which is really, really important. But anyways, what they're saying is that even though these people did not consume any post-workout carbohydrates, they restocked their stored carbohydrates just as fast as the other group. So what the hey? Well, that's because, like I said before, you can basically make quote unquote carbohydrates. You can make glycogen out of protein, or you can make it from lactic acid, or you can make it from glycerol, which you get from fats. So something like eggs or avocado or whatever. So again, because they've been doing keto for so long, their body has adapted to using fats for extra things. But this still doesn't solve the issue of, okay, well, you get up to those high intensities and now all of a sudden you don't have carbohydrates there. So what's going to happen? This one's, I'll leave it at that, because this study is, it's kind of a confusing one, but it's, out of all the studies, I would say this one is most interesting just because of that, like, crazy adaptation that the people made after 20 months. Like, they're learning how to store sugar from not consuming any.
Right.
But the other caveat to this one is that this was an endurance study. So most of their testing was at like lower-ish intensities. They didn't do like the high intensity stuff, which is kind of the initial concern in the first place. So
it sounds like this study itself highlights the idea of how revolutionary the ketogenic diet can actually be and how adaptable the human body is.
Yeah.
But taking that study and then blanket statement about CrossFit, like you're taking a study that doesn't back up what you're talking about and making it back up what you're talking about just by putting the results of the study in front of what you want it to support.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. Is they found the result that they wanted and then they kind of just put it into their own sentence.
Right. And again, this study was about endurance.
Yeah.
Long, slow distance.
I think it was actually ultra marathoners.
That's come on.
Yeah.
That's not the same.
Yeah.
And also doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best thing for ultramarathon runners either. It was like one single study. It was a long study, and it was obviously a good study. It's pretty cool. But that's not how science works.
Right.
Right? Like having a hypothesis, proving it to be true is like step one. Because then you have to like come at it from all the different directions to prove why it could not be true to support why it's true. Right? Like there's so many different steps to this whole thing to make it valid. But I mean, that's what happens when you have articles that are clickbait articles.
Yeah.
Which is 100% what this one is. 100%. Do you have anything else in your notes you want to touch on?
Not a lot. I guess the one other thing that they mentioned was that, I think this was kind of in the very last paragraph, was that maybe keto could be beneficial for recovery.
Yeah.
Which this is like the most interesting part to me, and I think the sexiest part. Mm-hmm. How many times have I said sexy? We should have
not enough.
Let's get a sexy count going.
3. Want me to read a little bit?
Sure. Why don't we?
So I think the main part, so they say inflammation can be a huge problem for the typical CrossFit athlete. That
reminds me. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off there, but I know in the article he said, quote unquote, a quick reduction in inflammation after your workout improves recovery. Well, you don't want a quick reduction. We've already talked about this 1,000 times.
Right. Like, and last week ad
nauseum. Like if you take an anti-inflammatory after your workout, that is not good. So anyways, sorry.
That's the next sentence. So the inflammation can be a huge problem for the typical CrossFit athlete as the demands of the sport are so intense. Check. One key to adequate recovery is a quick reduction in the inflammatory response brought on by exercise.
X.
Triple X, quadruple X, as many X's as you can
Vin
put.
Diesel.
No. That's just dumb. That's like, there's no, the end. Yeah. That's the whole argument. That's just silliness. Then it says the ketone bodies themselves have been found to reduce oxidative stress, reduce overall inflammation, and can even enhance endurance, exercise, fatigue, recovery. So it's kind of coming back to like, okay, well, that actually makes sense.
Yeah, other than the quick reduction part, because ketones are anti-inflammatory. That's one of the reasons why a ketogenic diet is possibly so beneficial for so many different illnesses, because we make these in the body, they literally block inflammation. So that's sweet. So yeah, that's
for specific illnesses.
Just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you have like high levels, again, this is like theoretically, let's say you just went through the CrossFit games. It's the day after. You're sore as shit. Your inflammation is definitely through the roof. If you could somehow all of a sudden, boom, be in ketosis, that could be beneficial because those are also anti-inflammatory. And at that point in time, you're not trying to get stronger, right? You didn't go to the CrossFit games to try and get stronger.
Right.
You went there to try and win.
Yep.
So as you're recovering from that, if you could get some anti-inflammatory benefits, could be beneficial for that. Yeah, just the recovery aspect in general, like ketones themselves, I always say they're kind of like mail couriers. Like not only are they an energy source, but they send all these different signals throughout the body and brain that have certain benefits. They're anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidant, all these things. And that's kind of, to come back to this, why sure they could maybe be beneficial for recovery. Mm-hmm. But the problem here is that they could be good for recovery, but they're not going to be good for your performance before you even need to worry about recovery.
Right.
So that's kind of the problem. And I mean, that's kind of why this whole market of exogenous ketones has popped up. They're trying to give people like the best of both worlds, but that's just a big rabbit hole that we'll save for another day.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to wrap up the article, and then we can kind of tie up any loose ends that you have. The big thing that stands out to me in the last paragraph of the article is when it says, it is time to drop the old stigma that only carbs can fuel an intense exercise. And then the last bit, he says, my personal experience has revealed that. Okay. So are we talking your personal experience now, or are we still talking about the articles that and the studies that you've referenced? Like, I'm just a little bit confused now.
Yeah, he's got to make up his mind.
Yeah. So he said, my personal experience has revealed that by following a keto diet through an extremely well implemented plan, you can begin to see benefits to body composition, metabolic efficiency, strength, Olympic lifting, and even reduce your overall inflammation within a month.
Yeah, and all that's true, but again, are we talking about him? Are we talking about a regular Joe? Or are we talking about someone who's serious, who's probably already lean, probably already strong, probably already deals with inflammation pretty well?
That's right.
Already has great aerobic capacity. Mm-hmm. Or are we talking about this dude?
Right.
Who, again, like I'm not bashing him. He had some pretty good results, but if you look at his before picture, like I'm assuming he wasn't like high level.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so like the distinction has to be made, like what does serious about CrossFit mean? Like going to CrossFit group classes 3 times a week is not serious about CrossFit.
Yeah, because I mean, this could work for someone like that.
Right. You're doing CrossFit and you should be proud of yourself for doing that. However, that's not like being serious about a specific sport is focusing on the performance aspect, not the body composition stuff. So to continue to loop back to the whole body composition changes and things like that don't make sense. And then 2 big red flags for me: body composition, metabolic efficiency, sure. Strength and Olympic lifting, no. Just straight up no. Olympic lifting, like you get better at Olympic lifting by Olympic lifting, not because you have a keto diet, right? Yeah. You get better at the skill itself. Strength, you get stronger by following a proper strength progression, fueling your body appropriately for that strength gain, and then lifting for 5+ years.
Yep.
Not a month. So those 2 things, absolutely not. And then even reduce your overall inflammation. You touched on that. true? Is
Yeah.
it the most beneficial thing? Do you want it to be reduced quickly? Like, what does all
Yep.
this stuff mean?
Yeah. And I guess I should also, to wrap up, if anyone was confused with my personal experiment that I explained earlier, I think now is a good time to re-outline it because it makes sense now with what we're saying. I was trying to get the best of both worlds. I was trying to be in keto when I woke up, get those benefits, have some sugar immediately before my workout so that I could get those benefits, and then burn through that so that I can then bounce back into keto post-workout and get those benefits all over again. So, did it work? I don't know.
Yeah. So you're not doing that anymore?
No, certainly not.
Right. So there's a reason for that, obviously.
Yeah. I don't remember how much we got into this last time, but it was my lack of sleep that ended the experiment. It wasn't the performance in the gym.
Wired and tired?
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. And I wasn't really surprised. I mean, I know why that was happening, and I have some ideas on things I could have tried, but all of them would have involved me spending a bunch of money on some different gadgets and a bunch of supplements. And at that time, I didn't really want to try that.
Right. When there was a easier solution to that.
Yeah, start eating a shit ton of white rice.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We'll wrap it up then. So if you're interested, the post is still up. The original comments are still there. You can see Chet's comments. You can see the other 1,200 comments on it. There's some good stuff in there. There's a lot of comments that were posted and had citations and things like that you also don't agree with, right? There's a couple in there.
I forget. Yeah, I forget. I think it was just things like you need glucose or whatever, which no, you can make it. You can make it from just fat. We talked about that. You can make glucose from, like we said, lactate, glycerol, amino acids. You're not going to die. You could fast for 5 days and then work out and have energy. It was just kind of these basic flaws, I guess.
Right.
So people disagreed, but their rationale was kind of poopy.
Right. So hopefully we cleared all that up in this episode.
Yeah, I hope so too.
You can always count on Instagram coming through with some content, some stuff to talk about. And just again, from a marketing perspective, well done. Combining keto and CrossFit in the same thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And I really do believe that these conversations are important to have, and not having big influencers like this not post things like that is nice, but having them post stuff like that is sometimes even better because it gets people talking about it a little bit, right? So it's is information that's being put out there the best? Probably not all the time. But does that make it a really bad thing? I think no, because then it gives us stuff to talk about and a little bit more research on your part too, because you dove into these articles, you dove into the references and kind of picked apart the studies a little bit. It helps you learn, it helps me learn by listening to you, it helps our audience learn by listening to us, and then more importantly just pushes our overall message, which is keep experimenting with things, but also keep asking why. Don't just take what somebody tells you, and just what we're telling you, don't just take what we're telling you as the be all end all. Challenge your own thinking and do your own research and do your own little experiments.
Yeah, totally agree. It's weird. I think it kind of makes people more willing to learn about stuff, because we could have had this exact same conversation without the post and people probably just would have been I don't give a shit.
Right. Yeah.
But with this, perks everyone's ears up, and then sure, I'll learn a little bit more about it.
Right.
So it's cool.
Yeah. Especially when the post has their favorite athletes commenting on it and being mad about it. But maybe you're not sure why they're so mad about it or why they're so triggered by it. It's I don't get what the big deal is, and hopefully this sheds some light on that as well.
Yeah.
Overall, it is a good account to follow for just general updates on the CrossFit community and like what's going on with competitions and stuff, just don't use blog style websites as your source of information for your health and nutrition. Like that's just something like it's kind of like picking up Shape magazine and being like, oh yeah, this is now my nutrition book. It's like, oh well, no, thanks.
Or Netflix documentaries that are titled The Game Changers.
That's right. All right, guys.
I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in.